Kathy, I said to you earlier, how do you define better? It's all about basically making the South East a better place. How do you define better?
I think you can define it on a number of fronts. I think one of the things I would say, and I'm very conscious actually that Jeff, our first chair, is in the room, and Jeff always used to say, the LEP's role was about how we make a great place even better. So I do think we have to remember we are in a good place. But actually, for me, better is about actually taking some of the things that we've been talking about and put it into action and start doing it and make it a better place. We've got, just listening to people today, we've heard about what all the issues are. And I think it's about actually taking that innovation in particular and putting some things in place. And actually, I think they are joined up. I don't think they're working against each other. I think they're all on the same page.
Well, Michael, I mean, one of the frustrations that's been highlighted this morning and is always highlighted is the difficulty of making this link, the policy link between transport interventions and health interventions. What can we do to try to break down these departmental silos? I mean, you work in government, but and the government works in these departments. So how do you break them down? What can you do at public health to influence transport policy so that it helps the health outcomes?
Yes, for me it's really important that we have a joined up and we work very closely with our colleagues in the Department for I can't remember what Department for Transport, and they always keep on changing. It's really important that we have that joined up, but also we need to move from an NHS illness service to an NHS health and wellbeing service. And I think the move of public health into local government has had a huge opportunity. And I've seen it on the ground that our public health colleagues working with local councillors and have made a real difference in terms of the local place. Is how we can join up on a national basis that will make an additional difference, I think. Because,
I mean, Alan, that's one of the issues I suppose you raise, is this kind of thinking about the environment as being this separate thing, which is being... I mean, how do you see this kind of joined up thinking, this breaking down of silos actually being enacted?
So for us, I think it is about the use of strategic planning. So at the moment, we would answer your first question around the health of the South East by looking at the condition of the 500 odd SSSIs that we've got in the region. But you get a false picture from that, because essentially what we're doing in those areas is stemming the tide, which is gradual species loss, and there is widespread loss outside. What we need to do is we need to operate at larger scale in some of the plans that we're doing, local authority scale or cross-local authority scale. We need to use our regulatory tools, so where we say no, and as importantly where we say yes, to plan at that bigger scale, so that you can plan gains in as well as simply trying to minimise the risks to the things that are already there. We can spend huge amounts of time, most of which goes to consultants and the production of reports, to mitigate the smallest risk. We need to flip some of that.
But I suppose I asked Kathy about the phrase better. To some, having more green spaces is not necessarily seen as something that's going to change their lives if they're struggling to get to school or to work.
And I think this is where the joined up planning needs to take place, because the evidence suggests that the strategy that the conservation movements have used for the last 20 odd years, which is you take people out into the environment, you make them see that and they go, oh gosh, and then they become converts to the cause. That doesn't work. And actually what we're trying to ensure through planning with the likes of Public Health England is that you put in place the infrastructure that people need, and you put in place the services that allow them to access and make use of that infrastructure. There'll be a proportion of those that go through some kind of emotional and behavioural change as a response. but relying on converting people to being natural conservationists isn't going to be the answer.
Claire, what about you? How do you? I mean, you mentioned the impact that buses can have on transforming people's lives, particularly in relation to housing. I mean, how do you see a better world?
Yes, well, a number of thoughts actually. There's just a couple of points actually, just from what has just been said as well. I was just reflecting on some of those other questions too. I mean, I just wanted to make a point around, joining everything up. The health, all the different. I think there's an important role for getting appraisal right, so that when funding is awarded, we're ticking off the right boxes. It's just a thought I just wanted to share. So yeah, housing. I mean, that's a good case in point. So I mean, one of the things that we published a report recently on better integration of the planning and delivery of sustainable transport with housing. I think one of the problems is that too often, housing and transport operate in silos. So to get that much more joined up approach, I think is fundamental. I think the other point is that the funding settlements need to be given to areas in a devolved, secure. I mean, the National Infrastructure Commission has talked about, devolved, secure, long-term budgets, so that areas can plan for things like housing, employment, transport, whatever, on a much more long-term strategic basis. So I think the kind of the funding, but then of course with that you have to have the right governance structures in place as well. So a lot of this is at the centre.
Do you think? I mean, you mentioned that the use of buses and getting a bus to work actually improves your health. Because
yes.
I mean, do you think that this transport strategy makes enough of that?
Well, look, I think that I'm really supportive of this strategy because I've been around the block long enough to recognise just how challenging it is to make any kind of changes and what we're up against in terms of the dominance of the car. So, I get, we could be more ambitious, could go for 2025, why not? It's not going to happen. We've got to go at a pace that is kind of, is challenging enough to keep, but isn't going to just depress people, and actually I think changes will come quicker and faster. We look, this is where I come back to the big points. It's around getting the price signals right. So there's a lot that the Transport the South East... Look, there's something I think the Transport the South East could really helpfully do on the whole national agenda. Love the thought leadership on road pricing, on getting that kind of discussion going. But this needs to become just part of what we talk about as is inevitable. We need to bring it on quicker. And that's the way to improve public transport, because, the balance so far is tilted too far the other way.
Right,
Sorry,
yeah.
I'm probably long answer. Long answer to many questions.
Okay, one moment. Kathy, I'm going to come to you before I go over there, if you don't mind. Kathy, you mentioned innovation and the need to get innovation. But I suppose the public sector and politicians have got a huge amount of aversion to taking risk, to going down new routes. How do you persuade your local politicians, your national politicians, to be innovative, to start thinking outside silos in the way that Claire talks about? Because they are naturally they have an aversion to taking risks, to doing things differently.
Well, I'm not sure I'd agree with you with that. I mean, just look at what's happening now and everything. So I do think... I think the issue is about presenting the right case. So if you've got something that is really innovative, you have got to put it in a way that is appealing to whoever you're speaking to, whether you're speaking to the public sector or whether you're speaking to the private sector. And I think one of the answers is, and the gentleman over here was talking about private sector investment, I think there are some opportunities there that we could embrace to sit alongside some of the things we want to do, so that when we're going to government or wherever, we're presenting a case which is innovative but could be part funded by some new approaches or whatever. We just need to do a bit more thinking outside the box and presenting our case clearly.
Different language?
I think a slightly different... Well, you've always got to adapt your language. Whether you're talking to politicians, whether you're talking local government or business, you've just got to always have that in our mind whenever we do it. But I think it's just got to be punchy enough. We've got to look at how the Northern powerhouses are operating, how the others are operating, and just get a touch more robust, but be realistic. Because actually, some of the slides, I was looking at the deprivation slide earlier, you know, if you looked at deprivation elsewhere, we would be shocked. So we have got deprivation along our coast, but actually the scale of it elsewhere is far greater.
Okay. Apparently we've got a question at the back here.
Colin Kemp, Deputy Leader, Surrey County Council. Thank you, Cathy, for defending the politicians in the room. And this is politician-led. There's a lot of politicians. Keith, our chair for TFSE, is driving this, and there's a lot of open-minded politicians in the room. But that's not why I stood up. Question for Michael, if I may.
Are you a risk taker?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. We've got to take risks, otherwise we're not going to create opportunities and change things for the future.
Okay,
so we need to take that. I may not get voted next time, but we'll see how that goes. Question for Michael. I think health is a really important part of this, and I totally agree with everything you said up there. The benefits to health are immense, but actually health is part of the solution as well. And depending who you ask the question, somewhere between 15 and 25% of all car journeys are health related. People go into clinics. So the health service needs to be around the table, and it needs to be thinking about how it brings clinics more local to take away the need for some of those journeys. Interested in your thoughts on that, and are you sitting at some of these tables and actually having those conversations?
Michael?
The answer is yes. I was fortunate to be in a meeting yesterday with all the chairs and chief executives of the Sustainable Transformation Partnerships. These are the new sort of infrastructures in the NHS across the whole of the South East. And we were assuring their plans for the NHS is implementing its national long-term plan. And some of the key targets that they have to try and meet now is around sustainability and air pollution. So they have to get their own house in order, rightly so, because of the significant impact that they have. And some of the really good examples that were coming through is about outpatients appointments. Do we physically need all these patients coming into outpatient appointments? Can't we use Skype? Can't we use telephone? Can't we use teleconferences? So there's some really good examples of how we can use digital to reduce the amount of people coming in, particularly outpatients. But also, how do we change the fleet? So all the ambulances and all the sort of the staff cars that they use. A lot of them are fleet cars. How can we change that to be more sustainable? But also the use of technology, so we're physically not going out and requiring patients to come in. So yes.
And building active travel into the strategy as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Cathy?
I think this is a really good example of how things are coming together. So you've got an ageing population. Colin's absolutely right. I think, Colin, actually the figures are higher than that in terms of the analysis we've done on how many trips are health-related. Dave and I were fortunate at our board meeting. We had someone come in and talk about the future of high streets and retail recently. Now, one of the issues they said was actually if we started to put some of our health centres in some of our shopping centres, that would help in terms of the transport in, but equally it would help our high streets. There's all sorts of things if you start thinking like that, and you were just talking about apps. We also know when we look at innovation, we look at entrepreneurs, there's a huge increase in people working in that health area and making money from it. And so this is where I want to get across, it is a real opportunity for us to do some things in this space.
Okay. The gentleman down here, yes.
Hi, yeah, it's Dan Anderson from Eurovia. In a way, you've already started to answer my question, which was about the use of technology and digital to reduce the need to travel in the first place. But my question was more related to kind of sectors where people can actually work remotely or from home. In a way, you're reducing transport, but in terms of health, you're also reducing possibly physical activity and also social interaction. So I was just wondering if there's any work that you've been doing in terms of predicting the impact of future work practices.
And then, Claire, can you talk about the impact of technology on increasing bus usage? Michael, you start.
That's a really good point. I don't think there has been some detailed analysis, but it is something that we are. Technology brings some really good advantages, but also there's some unintended consequences, a bit like Alexa. So we've now got one of the smoking apps is Alexa controlled, so Alexa can help you stop smoking, but equally it can also enable you to be less physically active. So yeah, it needs further analysis.
Claire, yeah, sorry, yes.
And I'm going to stick to the question this time.
Okay.
The one question. So technology and bus services. So I mean, as it's been referenced already, I mean there are innovations like mobility as a service. You know, that there are platforms where it could become a lot easier. So instead of reaching for your car keys, you reach for your phone, and you'll see all sorts of options, including public transport. You see the potential for technology to really increase car use. Of course, the flip side is that technology, what we've seen, for example, I think there's some research on the impact of Uber from the states in California that's actually, we've seen a decrease in public transport use and an increase in congestion where people are actually switching, journeys that they would ordinarily be maybe walking or taking public transport, it's quicker to, so it can go both ways. And so this is the kind of where we sort of we make sure that we direct the future the way we want it to go, to more public transport use, not increased cars.
Alan.
I was just going to challenge the premise of the question, if I may, which is that if we are looking to long journeys to work as a means of driving activity and health provision, there's something a bit messed up about that connection. That is a necessary part. It is not the purpose. Configuring people away from their working place in order to drive more activity, I'm not sure I buy that as a sort of a joined up piece of policy.
Mm-hmm. Alan, do you think there is a rural versus urban thing going on here? In terms of the way that the transport strategies address issues?
Hi, yeah, can I say something about that?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
My name's Brett Trafford from Fawley Waterside.
Can we get the mic up? Yeah, just keep talking, it'll come on.
Hi.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm Brett Trafford from Fawley Waterside, and for those of you that know me, know that we're developing what we refer to as an intelligent merchant city. It's an holistic thing, which involves everything that we're looking at. And I think I could pretty much hope to sum up kind of a better place in one or two words, because, to quote a colleague of ours from Oxford University, Professor Dieter Helm, he sums it up by saying, if we want to create England's green and prosperous land, we have to look at everything holistically. And just to answer two questions, on, if you like, working from home, and I'm miserable, so I've always worked from home. We need to have ubiquitous connectivity. People talking 5G, but I'm from the New Forest, we don't even have 1G. Secondly, we need to treat everything that we have right now as an asset, not just the soil in the environment. So the other thing is healthcare. I mentioned two things, connectivity and healthcare. Just as an example, I could talk about everything. But healthcare, I went to Nigel Watson, who's the chief executive of the NHS locally, and said to him, if you could start the NHS again, what might it look like? Because at Fawley Waterside, we can do that as an exemplar for how we might live in the future. And we need to adapt and adopt new technologies, new ways of moving about, transporting ourselves. Mm-hmm. So we have to look at technology, transport, energy, healthcare, everything holistically and do it in one place.
Kathy, which is the innovation that you're crying out for?
Yeah.
I mean,
I'd say that, and I don't think there's any one solution. So it's I think there are advantages. I think there are advantages to working from home. But you need that contact as well. So we've just moved into Desk Lodge at Basingview, which is an innovation centre. I'm very flexible in my approach, because actually that means that people can come in or they can work from home or whatever. And actually that's all about people's working lives and their flexibility and everything else.
Mm-hmm. Because the second thing there is trust.
Okay.
We have to have trust and connectivity.
Okay. Question here. So I'm going to...
Thank you. Couple of points. Ian Phillips, Deputy Chair of South Downs National Park. So I think I come from a very relevant background to the current topic. Couple of points. First of all, as a protected landscape, I don't think we see ourselves as a constraint on major infrastructure investment on transport or communications. More an opportunity, because we are certainly not averse to the idea of multimodal hubs, modal interchange, better buses, better rail, better light rail. We have an interest in connecting the rural economy and the rural population to employment. A lot of those are home workers. A lot of those people rely on the car for their communications. We would certainly like to see less reliance on the car. That means more investment in public transport and avoiding the need to travel. But we're also looking to boost connectivity by attracting more people from the urban hinterland surrounding the national park. We have 5 million people living in the towns and cities within reach of the national park. They tend to rely on cars to access it, or they don't access it at all because they don't have access to cars. So we're looking for ways in which to attract those people to a national park, which is the open-air gym and the sanatorium that Michael referred to, the healthy lung that is available to reach the large population of the southeast, including those deprived sectors.
So the point, Alan, can you just give us your view on? Do you think that we are overly focused in our transport planning on urban areas, just simply because that's when the majority of people are increasingly living?
I think there has been that focus on transport in the urban areas, and there has been an over-focus on conservation in the rural areas. And has just been described. We need to break down those silos for both the needs of the environment, because actually an awful lot of environmental features, things that are important, are in the urban and the peri-urban area. The main funding vehicle that we have for conservation at the moment is the farm payments. 30% of the land's ineligible. All the urban areas are ineligible for that. And we need to change that. We have also been focused very much on the exclusive and the rare, rather than thinking more broadly about the value and the benefit that the environment in a broader sense can provide to society. So thinking about the range of functions that a good environment can provide to people where and around where they live needs to be part of our considerations as we weigh up the overall effects of investments in other types of infrastructure.
Okay. Question just over in the middle over there, is it? Yes.
Good afternoon all. I'm Demetrius Makesons, a Member of Youth Parliament for North West Hampshire, and I'm here today with some of my other members of Youth Parliament, Gareth Boyce and Bethan Hogan, along with our Development Officer, Vicky Hall from Hampshire County Council. I hope now that I'll bring a fresher perspective. Now, the UK Youth Parliament runs an annual youth consultation called Make Your Mark. In fact, it is Europe's largest youth consultation of young people, which heard 1.1 million young people just last year. Now, 78,000 young people last year told us that transport is a problem. This year we've run Make Your Mark yet again, and what has been the biggest problem? Transport. Young people across Hampshire have told that public transport can be very costly, unreliable, unsafe, and is not always clean. Now, young people have now actually stopped trusting transport and even using it. So what will you do to ensure that young people are able to travel where they want to go at a reasonable cost, in a clean, safe, and environmentally friendly public transport service? And also, specifically, how will you ensure that young people are involved in making the decisions as they are in the future? One more question. And how will you attract young people to use public transport?
Kathy, I'm going to have to start with you.
Right. Okay. I think there's three questions there. I think the attraction, the involvement of young people. I think Mark or Rupert were talking earlier about involved in this consultation. I think one of the things is we need to reach out, and I would say you can help us in how we reach out to young people, because we do need to reach out to that particular audience.
As a LEP, do you interact with the Youth Parliament?
We don't. We don't. But we are on a mission to engage with younger people, which is why I'm going to make a beeline for you when we break for lunch to actually find out what's happening. And I think it's it's a difficult question, because actually you almost need to ask a lot more. Bit more information about where it is people are trying to get to, and also help people understand just how the transport system works and how it, if we are to make it cheaper, it is going to need much bigger subsidies, which means money's got to come from elsewhere. And that's a debate that we just need to have, and you can see that overseas where they get more of a debate.
Claire, I live in London. My kids have a Zip card or a young person's card, and they've got a credit card. They can just use any bit of transport. It's a single card. It maxes out how much they pay. It's all very, very simple. Do we need some kind of southeast regional-wide young person's card which just allows them to have cheap travel anywhere without even thinking about it?
Well, there's no point in having it if there aren't the bus services to use it with. So, I mean, I thought that was really good, and I can see a really good role for the Youth Parliament. Where is the speak? I've got a task for you. Well, first of all, you're totally right that young people are much more. It's really good to hear those stats, and I'd like to get some more stats from you if we can speak later. Young people are particularly dependent, and we got some great research that showed. I mean, for example, job seekers, 77% of job seekers have no access to a van car, are completely dependent on buses. That rises to 87% of 18 to 24-year-olds. So, it's like that's just one of many stats to just shows how important it is. Now, one of the problems, I mean, actually, fortunately, amazingly, buses have gone up the agenda. Has everybody noticed that? They have. They've arrived. Well, they have anyway. I mean, we've now got a Prime Minister who still Prime Minister who claims to be a bus nut. We.
but what he was saying,
sorry,
they're too expensive. He was saying that they're too expensive, which is why they don't use them.
I know. So the thing is, up until now, what's happened is the bus user voice has not been loud enough. The lobbying for buses has not been loud enough, right? We've got a really vocal car users, which is why politically fuel duty increase, forget it. We have to do it. But so what we need is young people to be being as loud and as vociferous as the car lobby, for investment in public transport.
To be fair, he's got 78,000 of them, though.
Sorry?
It's got 78,000 of them making a noise.
Yeah, no, we'll do it more.
So who's he got to make the noise to?
Well, look, the thing is, we you know what? In anything, you have to keep on saying the same message over and over again until you are bored to death of hearing yourself say it. Only then have you said it to enough people.
Okay. Have you got any Glastonbury tickets? I mean, to be quite honest, it's about the best bet you've got for Glastonbury tickets.
That is honestly. And to climate impact, join it all up. I mean, this is the moment. We really need to get people out of cars. We've got to promote public transport.
One of the things, we just need to understand demand. So actually, one of the issues we've got is, and there'll be some people here from bus companies and whatever, is actually it's about the financial viability of making these services work. So the issue there is, it is no good just saying, well, the young voice has got to get louder. Actually, it is about people using those services more in order to get more services then coming in, which will then potentially can bring down the cost.
I can see.
And I think it's those two things needing to come together.
I can see you can't. He's rolling his eyes there.
Right.
Why you've got a microphone? Come back.
Okay. You've said that, but attracting young people to use public transport, how are you going to do that? So, like I've mentioned, young people have started not to trust public transport just because it is extremely expensive, and especially for college users, whenever they're travelling, they're trying to get across their county or wherever they need to go. They need, where is that attraction? So what will young people how will they travel, and will they travel in comfort? Things like that, really. So how will it attract?
What I'm trying to get across is the whole thing is really, really complex, because what we've got to do is if the issue is to do with the cost of transport, we need to think about either how we get more money into the hands of people who are using it, which actually is difficult when you're talking about students, or we have got to think about a way about how we drive down those costs, which is potentially subsidies, and we come right back to one of the things that I think Rupert mentioned right at the very beginning about you're then into a very political debate about how much money has been going in to particularly local authorities, which has led because they've had to make cost savings, they've taken away some of those subsidies. So it means that actually we've got to have that debate about what matters most. Now, if we come to a conclusion that actually we really need to get young people travelling. I think that's right, to colleges and the like. We need to then have that debate about where our money's going.
Okay.
And
Claire,
that's the thing, because that's the thing that is going to make it more attractive.
Claire, quick final point, and then I'll come here for another question.
Yeah, so just to add to that, because as Kathy says, it is complex, you've got to look at it from the whole system point of view. And it comes back to the point around getting the price signals right. So actually what we've seen is the cost of motoring reducing relative to the cost of public transport. So it's part of the whole bigger picture. So at the moment, the setup is just, it's almost damaging for public transport. We've got it the wrong way around. So that's what we're up against.
Okay, question here.
Yes, Charles Halliday. I'm representing Friends of the Earth today, but this is more of a local question. And come back to health provision. You've said fine words about putting clinics in the centres of towns, but in Farnborough itself, we've just moved a clinic from the centre of town to an industrial park 2 miles away, out of its catchment area, no bus service, no nothing. So we've had fine words, but there's absolutely nothing to back it up.
Michael,
so what are you doing
thinking
about it?
Thank you for raising that. I can't argue against that because I don't know the specific details around that. But you've raised a really important point. If we want to enable patients, particularly as they get older, to be able to access treatment, we need to ensure that they can access that. But also the days of doctors going out and doing house calls is very much in the past. Is very much around providing those sort of treatment centres. What the NHS, and particularly the NHS long-term plan, is around providing treatment closer to home. So it does kind of go against that. So there must have been a local decision around that. But yeah, you've raised really important points.
And I suppose a serious point in terms of feedback to the transport strategy is to make sure that those issues are embedded in it. Thank you very much to our panel. Thanks to Alan, to Claire, Kathy and Michael. Round of applause to our panellists. Thank you very much.